Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In preparing for this conversation, we hadn't expected how important semantics would be when approaching subjects like crisis, failure, and perfection. These words can carry tremendous baggage, but the Alice Bailey teachings and Agni Yoga completely reframe them. Crisis isn't something to avoid. It's actually how consciousness expands. And failure isn't real. There's only the loss of time. And perfection isn't an impossible standard, but rather it's our essential nature that we're just returning home to. So this conversation examines how crisis brings everything floating in the atmosphere to a point where we can actually work with it, and why avoiding crisis means avoiding life itself. So we hope this conversation can change or at least give you some insight into how you view your own setbacks and challenges. And we hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you do enjoy this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation, it helps us to bring you this podcast as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. Okay, back to the podcast with crisis, failure, and perfection. In doing my research for this episode, one of the things I was not expecting was how important semantics is when you are approaching subjects like crisis, failure, and perfection. Right off the bat, I also hadn't really considered how important time would be. And Alice Bailey spends, a good amount of ink on time. But when we think about crisis and failure, perfection, crisis, failure, perfection, it becomes almost like a striving loop. We spoke very briefly before we started about how we're going to throw striving into this conversation. But it reminded me of a kind of a funny moment when I got my first big tour managing gig on a bus. And the band's manager, it had been a band that I'd worked for years as a guitar tech. And so I got hired as a tour manager. And I said, don't worry, Rich. I'm not gonna, I won't screw this up. And he goes, oh no, you're going to mess up. Just don't mess up the same way twice. And that was like a big thing for me. I was like, oh, okay. That was a new way of looking at it.
Exactly. And I think as we go through these texts, we're going to go through the text that Alice Bailey received from the Master DK. We're going to look at some of the writings from Agni Yoga. We're going to look at some poetry. We're going to look at through different lenses. But what you realize, it's all about we're given the opportunity to learn. And so we may have to redefine how we hold failure. You mentioned semantics. Well, I'm just thinking the word crisis, I believe the two Chinese characters that make up the word crisis are danger and opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that's always appealed to me. You can see crisis as a danger or crisis as an opportunity, and it's both. Mm-hmm. Danger means that there's the possibility or the risk, quote unquote, of things falling apart. And if you hold on to something too tightly, when it falls apart, you go down with the ship. Or you can see it as an opportunity to take a step forward. And I know I've said this a number of times in different broadcasts, not just the podcast, but in other settings, that if we didn't have a crisis, all the stuff that's floating in the atmosphere wouldn't come to a point of precipitation. We wouldn't see it, we would feel it. But it wouldn't present itself in time and space. Here we go back to time, Joey. Mm-hmm. Time allows us to bring things to a point. And a crisis is a convergence in time, space, and substance of all the things that are floating in the ethers that need to be redeemed. It presents itself to us. It's a presentation in the present. Mm. And so a crisis, if you look at it dispassionately, is to be welcomed. Mm. So I think we're going to bump into this all the way through our exploration of oh, no, it doesn't mean this, it means this. Yeah, or it's not limited by this. It actually can be expanded to invite us to grow.
Yeah, I really like how that ties what you just it ties back into kind of the Zen Buddha's concept of noble failure.
Yeah.
And I think they sum it up as, my understanding is that it's like the idea that crisis provides the place from which an extended vision can be gained.
Right.
Like that's why that's because that's what it is. It's perfect. But it comes back to semantics because when you're in that crisis, yeah, it might not feel that great.
Because I may be invested in the world I'm attempting to hold together. But that world is only the classroom.
Yeah.
So if I try to hold the classroom together rather than enter into the learning process, it's not my job to control what's been set up by my soul and the laws of karma. It's my task to learn from it. As you said, don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. I mean, that is a good question. I think maybe this is something we can kind of keep in mind as we go through this, but like, how do we distinguish between like a soul-driven crisis and self-created drama,
I think this is going to be revealed as we go through this section on Ponder on This.
I kind of...
For those of you who are new to the podcast, we take extracts from Ponder on This, which is a compilation of the writings of Alice Bailey, and she was, if you like, she took dictation at a distance from the Master DK when she was living in the West and he was living in Tibet. And we've got all these books, they're called the Blue Books. And what we do is we go through them and attempt not just to make sense of them, but allow them to speak to us now at this time, rather than saying, oh, this was written 80 years ago, 90 years ago, how is it relevant? Well, the truths are eternal, but they need to be applied and translated into something that is useful in the now. And that's really, if you like, what we've always attempted to do in our podcast is make available some of this timeless, ageless wisdom so they can be of help to everybody right here and now. So should we just start with section 28 on crisis?
I think so, because it was striking me, because we've been through quite a few of these different sections, and every once in a while, I mean, she starts out with a banger right from the beginning, and this is a real kind of in your face kind of call. Like it's more direct, I think, than sometimes.
Yeah, this is basically just. It's a locker room talk.
Yeah. That's
a locker room talk by the elders to this incarnated soul.
Yeah.
So think of it that way. We're on the playing field.
That's right. Or it's at halftime, or we're down by 2.
Yeah, and coaches. So this is what coach says. Yeah. Coach being the enlightened beings that guide us. Shirk not these crises, hard and difficult though they may appear to be. Difficult they are. Forget not that the habit of confronting crises is a long-established one with the consciousness of humanity. Man has, quote unquote, habit of crisis, if I may so call it. They are only the points of examination as to the strength, purpose, purity, and motive and the intent of the soul. They evoke confidence when surmounted, and produce greatly expanded vision. They foster compassion and understanding, for the pain and inner conflict they have engendered is never forgotten, for they draw upon the resources of the heart. They release the light of wisdom within the field of knowledge, and the world is thereby enriched. I mean, that's a whole podcast just in that paragraph,
I know,
Joey.
and that line, man has the habit of crisis. I thought that kind of sums up the entire microcosm of what we experience here as humans.
And it doesn't say it's a bad habit that we've got to overcome. Mm-hmm. If you look at what it says before, it says that forget not that the habit of confronting crisis is a long-established one within the consciousness of humanity. Mm-hmm. It's basically saying this is the pedagogical approach of evolving life on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
and people have often referred to the earth as the schoolroom or the classroom of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Or we've given it these sort of tough names
Sure.
because it is like boot camp for the soul.
It really is.
So, what else did you get out of this one? Because here it says that when we go through these times of crisis, they evoke confidence. Well, confidence means with trust, with faith.
Yeah.
Confide.
Right.
That means you're reassured that life is fair and just.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's also a little bit of a leap of faith too. You have to, I mean, there is that element is there, and that is something that's a through line that's why I said it kind of depends on semantics. There is a kind of faith thing here that is not necessarily there in some of the other parts of the teaching. Like this is a real leap of faith to say that this whole process, this whole thing that we do, is ultimately for the good.
Well, the leap of faith, and if you have any doubt, you can't leap. I go back. We're going to go back to the Matrix, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay, Mouse, load the jump program.
Load the jump program, yeah. Yeah,
And
that's true.
he failed because there was a fleeting doubt that he couldn't make it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing that I noticed is almost universally in the touring and the entertainment world, and this didn't matter if you were on the crew side or the band side or anything. Ever like on a tour with sometimes 50, 60 people to a person, at some point in their early career, every single one of those people had to make a leap of faith that didn't make any sense. And the ones that did were the ones that succeeded, and the ones that didn't were the ones that never made it, and it was really interesting to get to know those stories because every single person had that crazy story where like they said, nope, I'm going to do this thing and everyone's telling me it's going to fail.
Well, one of the words of power on the path is dare, to dare. So daring is not foolhardiness. Daring is an act of will with total faith and knowing that in the end it will work out.
Yeah.
That is your own safety net. But you still may fall and have failures, but it's part of the learning process. And this is what we're going to hopefully get into, is that failure is not, I blew it. Failure is, it's an opportunity for further growth.
Yeah.
So this first paragraph just sort of laid it out there.
Yeah, every once in a while there's a paragraph. I mean, this is all good stuff, but every once in a while there's a paragraph that's like, that's one we have to keep coming back to.
I think so. Yeah. And it says, because these crises foster compassion and understanding for the pain and inner conflict they have engendered is never forgotten. So it's imprinted in us, and so we don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes in terms of the macro humanistic kind of thing, that's history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Like we sometimes forget as a species some of these lessons that we've learned, and then that's why they're so painful when you have to relearn them, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Well, now we're going to just be spontaneous in the moment. So I'm going to pull out an Agni Yoga quote now, prompted by what you just said. This one is from Super Mundane.
Okay.
People usually are amazed that human consciousness appears to experience again and again the same achievements and the same failures. The question arises, why must one return if it is possible to move forward? But this returning, in quotes, is only illusory. Evolution never returns to previous points, but passes above them. People complain that they fall back into coarseness, but they do not realize that this state is not as before, for many new factors have entered their lives. It would be wrong to look upon life from one angle only. Life is a complete synthesis, and only in its multiformity does it reveal that the spiral has completed its turn. So failures are points of learning on the spiral. You're not caught in the Groundhog Day of failure.
Right. Yes. I mean, even in the movie The Groundhog Day, he took with him the experience of the previous day. So he wasn't approaching each day as the same thing. And it's kind of saying the same thing, is that I think that's really an important way to think about that, because even if you even if you do make the same mistake twice, the second time you made it, it's a different mistake because you should have had the knowledge before. So now you have this different perspective, or even if it wasn't your fault, you now have the data.
And that opportunity reveals an even greater lesson you can learn because of what you brought with you.
Mm-hmm.
And in Agni Yoga, just to quote one more from the Agni Yoga teachings, from the book Agni Yoga, it says, one can trace how, over the last 1,000 years, waves of sicknesses have swept over Earth. By these records, one can compile a curious tabulation of human failings, because sicknesses clearly show the negative aspects of our existence.
Mm.
So when you are whole and synthesized, you're healthy.
Yeah.
And when you're diseased and disconnected, you get sick.
Yeah, it also kind of reminds me of that. Yeah, and this is a Joey paraphrase, but that kind of Buddhist idea that there's only wisdom and ignorance. There's no good or evil, because if you had the wisdom, then you wouldn't be doing that thing if you truly understood the
Right.
ramifications.
Exactly. And that's held inside the context of life is good, and therefore it seeks to reveal its goodness through all things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get people at some particular point along evolution where they develop their mind and they developed a self-centered attitude where they misappropriate the energies of life and create things that go against the evolutionary flow. That, when it is done consciously against the greater purpose of evolution, does become quote unquote evil or inappropriate.
Okay. Yeah.
It's inappropriate.
Right.
Because what is appropriate is the revelation and the liberation of the spirit within matter and the raising of matter itself through that liberation. So, wow, I think we could spend the rest of the year on this, Joey.
Well, when I started reading this stuff for this episode, I knew that this is going to be a paragraph that I'm going to come back to quite a bit, because it's every sentence you could spend quite a bit of time meditating on, and
right,
and just and it's also interesting how these three topics, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, is just our current sort of hustle culture, like like this, like how do we frame failure in a world that's in constant crisis? So you have to really kind of almost semantically move yourself through and around it.
And often failure is celebrated by the opposition as there, I told you so, look, they failed. So the idea of people interacting is to cause the other person to fail.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no better encapsulation of that than maybe the short in terms of Wall Street, in terms of stock markets. You're betting on someone to fail. It's such a weird karmic energy to to think about. I mean, I understand that it has a purpose, but it just almost seems like, gosh, you're really not rooting for us.
But Joey, that model comes out of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason we could put that model in play is if we held that in our minds as a reality.
Yeah. I get it too. It's almost like you wonder, like, did anybody bet on Icarus?
Right.
Like I'm going to short Icarus.
I'm going to short Icarus.
He's not making it.
Oh, and I'm going to buy some shares in wax.
Yeah.
And feathers. But right. Wax.
Yeah.
Wax is the big thing. Okay. So now we go into something that expands it. The creative crisis, then in parenthesis, for humanity, has been made possible by three major happenings. And now we're going to expand ourselves, step back and sort of look at history in a more, not just a panorama, but a cosmorama. Mm-hmm. 1, the conclusion of a 25,000-year cycle or movement around what is called the lesser zodiac. This connotes a major cycle of experience in the life of our planetary logos. Do you imagine you and I going to university or having an incarnation where it's a classroom? Mm-hmm. What we've just read says that the life of our planet, the planetary logos, the being who ensouls and embodies this planet and who is the steward of this planet, the learning cycle is 25,000 years. It goes in these 25,000 year cycles. And we just completed one. So number 2 says, the end of the Piscean age. This simply means that the energies coming from Pisces during the last 2,000 years are now being rapidly superseded by energies coming from Aquarius. So it's like, oh, now we're going to be focusing, we just changed subjects. Okay, now we've been studying that. Now you're going to go to your history lesson or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a new energy coming in, same classroom, new energy. These result in major changes in the life of the planetary logos. So now we're being asked not just think about ourselves, but we are aspects of a greater being who itself is in school, is evolving. So these result in major changes in the life of the planetary logos and potently affect his body of manifestation through the medium of his 3 major centers, Shambhala, the hierarchy, and humanity. Now that simply means, if you're thinking about the chakras, Shambhala would be the head center. Hierarchy would be the heart. Humanity is the throat center. This is the creative triangle, that is the highest creative triangle of energies inside a being. And then third, just to round this out, the increasingly dominant activity of the 7th ray of order or ceremonial magic, as it is somewhat erroneously called. This ray is now coming into manifestation and is in close cooperation with the 2 above factors. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
The ray of order or ceremonial magic is the 7th ray. I like to call it the ray of synthesis. So what we're seeing now is this call to come together. And it's all based on frequency. Birds of a feather flock together. That means you could have a whole communion of loving stewards of the planet, or you could have a street gang.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think you were going there. That's funny. But that's true. Yeah.
Because that's what it does. It calls together. It calls together what's present in the field. So if there are negative aspects where parts of us are trying to rob each other, it's going to have organized crime.
Oh, yeah.
It will strengthen organized crime, the 7th ray. It's like the rain waters all plants.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Including invasive species.
Yeah. That's a very interesting take. And I thought that was interesting, just that she brings in that. Obviously, like someone else brought all these quotes together and put them in Potter on this, and that they weren't written in this particular order. But yeah, I also thought it was interesting how we move through these different ages. It's almost like we, there's 2 different versions of, you can go to college where like you take all your classes at once or you take one at a time. It's like we're kind of moving from like these subject to subject. But I also find it interesting that we happen to be around during this transition phase.
Right.
What an interesting time.
Well, it's like we're going from high school to college.
Yeah.
It's a major shift.
Yeah.
It's a major shift when you have a change of a 25,000 year cycle or a 2,500 year cycle or whatever the cycles are. They all line up. And so they give you a greater opportunity, but they also give you greater danger. So this is the crisis. So the next paragraph, which is taken from Discipleship in the New Age, speaks to what you brought up at the beginning of the podcast. Unless such moments of crisis occur, the life simmers down to a general dead level and then in parentheses, even if useful, offers not the chance for an extreme effort with its consequent need to draw upon the full resources of the soul. So basically, without crises, we're just going to cruise.
Yeah. I think you kind of see that sort of comically in The Big Lebowski. I mean, if it wasn't for these constant crises, the dude would just go bowling and hang out.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but it is through the crucible of these crises that you learn the measure of yourself and how you your capabilities, your skills, your capacities, and then you see the points where you need to grow. Those pain points show where you have potential.
It stirs the pot. If you imagine a cauldron, and when a cauldron is left and it's not heated from underneath, everything settles down to its own level. All the sediment goes to the bottom, and it's sort of in different strata. When you heat it up from underneath, it starts to move, and sort of all the stuff from the sediment on the bottom comes to the top, and it starts to bubble and churn. Well, what have you done? You've applied fire.
Mm.
You've not made it bad. You've just set it in motion so that you can create a crisis in order to learn and not just lead a stagnant life.
Yeah.
If there's no movement in water, you get stagnation, and stagnation breeds mosquitoes.
That's true. It's also interesting, and maybe it's not an exact map on, but it's also kind of how Bitcoin works with time and crisis. So, at the beginning of each block, it's a the sort of starting gun goes off, and everyone's trying to figure out the winning number for that block, and then it becomes a chunk of time that is now forever sealed. It's interesting.
Yes. Well, remember, as St. Augustine said, time is simply that in which to find God.
Yeah.
So we've got one more paragraph in this section, 28, from Ponder on This, called Crisis. It says, the handling of crises is the hallmark of the disciple, and every crisis met and rightly handled provides, and then parenthesis, once the difficulty is occultly under the feet, the place from which an extended vision can be gained, fresh knowledge can flow in, and the transmuting light can shine from the angel of the presence and thus produce results. Each of you, and he's talking to his group of students he's writing to, each of you has passed through a cycle of real difficulty and strain. This is true of all disciples. So if you walk the path, you've agreed to go on this learning journey, and you can't have a learning journey without crises, because that's how we learn. So avoiding crisis is avoiding life itself.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you throw yourself in there and a foolhardy, or you see yourself as a victim of stuff that's happening to you. A crisis is an opportunity to expand your consciousness, your compassion, and your capacity to be of service to others. And therefore, without crisis, nothing would move.
Right.
There's nothing to break it up. It's like, I know from a gardening perspective, sometimes you get a crust forming on the earth. And when a crust forms on the earth in certain regions, you get moss growing. And then when the moss grows, it creates certain microorganisms, and it starts to change it from one kind of vegetation to another. And when enough moss grows, you then start to get the forests that are based on conifers, and that. So it changes. So if you let things harden up, you've got to cultivate the soil. You've got to break things up occasionally to let the air in, to let things happen. So I believe that crisis has to be seen as the next gateway into a new way of being. If it's not seen, why would I go through a gateway if it's the gateway of death and I'm afraid of death? But if it's the gateway of rebirth, which contains death and birth inside it together, I'm going to go through rebirth. Oh, I'd like to be reborn into something more. Yeah, but if you want to be reborn, you got to die first. And the crisis is an opportunity to die to old patterns and be born to new awarenesses that we then embody. So when we come back, we may face something that resembles what we faced before, but as you pointed out, we're different. We approach it in a different way because we got more wisdom, and therefore more learning is revealed to us.
Yeah.
You can only get out of a situation as much as you can fathom. And when you're wiser, you can get more out of a crisis. And the wiser you become, the more these crises are opportunities for accelerated growth. That's why I think they referred back to the life of the planetary logos itself. You think of a crisis that a planet's facing. You think you and I have crises. Oh my God, I've got a crisis. It's, I've got the rats have just eaten the wiring underneath my car again, yeah, but what's that compared to a crisis facing the life that is responsible for a planet when one of its elements, i.e. the human species, is not functioning properly?
Mm.
It's had its wiring chewed.
Yeah.
And the signals are not getting through. So what's the lesson for the planetary logos now? That's beyond our understanding.
Well, I think, it's definitely gives the crisis its ability, or it's a possibility for humans to sort of test our ability to act together rather than separation. I think these kind of global crises, in the same way that you look at within a family or within your relationships, like it's that same thing. It's this opportunity for unity and to act together rather than to act separate. And sometimes we take it, sometimes we don't. Yeah.
And that is you've named it, Joey. This is the lesson that's facing us now. Can we learn that the pathway that we're being invited to walk is one from self-centeredness to whole-centeredness, from egocentric to ecocentric? Because otherwise we are locked inside this sealed unit. And when something is sealed, it's like being inside a tomb. We can entomb ourselves. And when you're entombed, there's no movement and you're not growing. So I think this is why the big shake-up's happening at the moment on the planet, because we've called forth not just karmically the consequences of our actions, but our soul is saying, you can't continue to live this way and expect that you can reveal and be an exemplar of the qualities of the soul. There's a big gap. So this is where you can say, has humanity failed? So maybe this is a good time to look at failure. So this is going to, I think, touch all who listen, and I think both of us as well. This is section 54 from Ponder on This. It's called Failure. And it's a lengthy paragraph, and we're going to probably break it up into a couple of chunks. This is how it starts out. It is a serious waste of time for a disciple to ponder upon a failure or to fear failing. There is no such thing as failure. There can only be loss of time. That in itself is serious these days of dire world need. But the disciple must inevitably someday make good and retrieve his past failures. I need not point out that we learn by failure, for that is a well-known truth and is known as such by all who are attempting to live as souls. Nor need the disciple sorrow over the failures, apparent or real, of his fellow disciples. The sense of time, italicized, produces glamour and disappointment, whereas the work goes truly forward, and a lesson learned by failure acts as a safeguard for the future. Thus, it leads to rapid growth.
Yeah.
What does that touch in you?
Well, I mean, I feel like this is personally speaking to me. Everyone has a different learning style in life. Maybe you're a semantic learner, or a kinesthetic learner. Or I'm a failure learner. I learned. I have to. That's also why it's even though I continue to make myself a beginner, I continue to learn new things. As a beginner, the way that I have to learn is just to make all the beginner mistakes, and so. For me, I mean, it just absolutely speaks to me. Like, and I think one of the things that, if I noticed a pattern in my own life, was that, especially like when I was moving out into the world, is that I didn't sweat those. The failures were crushing, but then I was able to just, whether it was the next day or the next week, was just to get up and start trying again. You know, and I did have that thing where, like, obviously I didn't want to go through that same pain thing again, so I would try to adjust the way that I was learning and working. But um, in the same way that whatever however you may feel about Elon Musk and SpaceX, they blow stuff up and move on. They find that, okay, that part didn't work, move on. And
Mhm.
it's interesting that the one thing is that the loss of time is really the only thing that.
I was just about to requote that. I was
Yeah,
looking as you were speaking. There is no such thing as failure. There can only be loss of time.
yeah.
In that way, failure, quote unquote, failure prolongs the process of revelation of what's inside of us, the
Mm-hmm.
truth, goodness, and beauty of
Mm-hmm.
who we are. But the revelation of truth, goodness, and beauty is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
It is the final outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the ability to accelerate, and this is where the illusion of time and space. So our failures create more time for us to learn the lessons. And that creating of more time can seem to prolong the process. Now, that's fine if that's how evolution works. But what if the planet itself is on a timetable? Not a mechanical tick-tock timetable,
Mm-hmm.
but a cyclical timetable where it's unfolding in rhythmic cycles. As we just said, we just finished a 25,000-year cycle. We just come out of a 2,200-year cycle. So there are certain cyclical moments that have their own pressure, the pressure of time. This is the pressure of the cycle. And the only pressure that really exists is the pressure of the soul inside to be revealed. And we do that in the different seasons. So if I, screw up too much and don't get it, I've actually not just delayed myself, but the larger timing is also off. And this is interesting because if you go through the Alice Bailey books, they had this vision. Well, after the Second World War, we would have learned our lessons and we would move into an era of peace. And then we will be able to touch into that place of deeper love within us, and the presence of this greater love will be born within our hearts. And they said this should happen by 1975, and then 1975 rolls around. They go, well, no, we push it out a bit. We're still kicking the can down the road as far as time. It's inevitable that deeper love within our heart will be born because it's the essence of who we are. But we have the ability to slow things down.
Yeah, on that subject, it almost feels like and this is the good thing about cycles and why we come out of them, is it's like we kind of fall in love with the Maya. We fall in love with the classroom and forget that we're not supposed to stay here forever. So we kind of drag it out instead of learning the lesson and getting on with things.
Well, may I read the next? We've got one more. We stopped halfway through, but I'm going to jump to another quote and then go back to the paragraph that we just were exploring, because it just addresses what you've said. The emergence of emotional conditions or of glamour in your life expression need not necessarily indicate failure. There is only failure if there is identification with these astral conditions and a succumbing to old rhythms.
Well, there you go.
There you go. That's what I said.
Yeah. But that's exactly kind of what I was getting at, and that's why I was saying that I got that from that. It does feel that way, that you almost, I guess the way I look at it is, no matter what, like there's no way that unless something, let me rephrase that. Unless something tragic happens, I will outlive my dog's life. We're just on different cycles, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's also a reminder that, like, that about so many things about time and attention and love and these lessons, that there is a time limit to them so that you can learn them and continue on.
Or forms are temporal.
Yeah.
Like you and I, we met in the parking lot and there was a butterfly flying by, a beautiful butterfly. And I went, oh, that's had an amazing journey to get there. That amazing journey, which probably feels like an eternity to the butterfly, it's just probably a blink of an eye compared to our lives.
Yeah.
But look at the beauty that was revealed in that time, in that cycle, Joey.
Yeah.
and what it went through. Total dissolution of self, disidentification. Green soup. So now we're going to pick up a similar thing. I'm going to reread the last sentence that we finished on. Nor need the disciple sorrow over the failures, apparent or real, of his fellow disciples. The sense of time produces glamour and disappointment, whereas the work goes truly forward, and the lesson learnt by failure acts as a safeguard for the future. Thus it leads to rapid growth. An honest disciple may be momentarily glamoured, but in the long run, nothing can really deter him. What are a few brief years in a comparative cycle of eons? What is a second of time in a span of a person's allotted 70 years, or it's longer now? To the individual disciple, they appear most important. To the onlooking soul, they seem as nothing at all. For the world, perhaps, a temporary failure may connote delay in expected help, but that again is brief, and help will come from other sources, for the plan goes unerringly forward. And this was taken from a treatise on white magic. He said, look, the plan simply means the unfolding of the purpose of the planetary logos that we referred to just now. Nothing's going to stop that. We can delay it by, missing the call.
I think of that one line, what are a few brief years in the comparative cycle of eons, but that's all. We also kind of have, we don't have that, but there's that kind of idea that you go backpacking for a year, or the gap year in school. It's like, but when you're the person engaging in that gap year, that is just, you maybe only have 16, 17 years, 18 years of life so far. So it's a big chunk to you, but everyone else is sort of looking at you going, oh, well, it's a nice little distraction for a minute. And then you get on with your life. And in some ways that, like, our whole lifespan is a nice little distraction. It's a nice little side quest.
Well, if you treat every cycle and measure it not in time, chronological time, but measure it as a cycle of opportunity, it takes on a different dimension.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you think of us as the one, being all these little fractals to go on all these little side quests to learn these lessons, but it's not the whole story.
No. I was thinking of, we were talking about failure. I was thinking about Thomas Edison, this famous quote, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's great. He had a lot of these things. And another one of his, which I really like, is, "When you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this, you haven't."
I always think about on that quote, when you think you've exhausted all possibilities, you haven't. Just ask Tesla.
Right, exactly. Are you talking about Nicholas?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, Nicholas Tesla.
Right.
Yeah.
And this, and then the final one from Edison. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up.
Yeah, that one was actually, for me, that was one of the most heartbreaking things about a lot of the time that maybe I'd be working for a band, and I saw this time and again where they're just on the cusp, and something gives out, something gives, or it's like, oh man, so close.
And that Edison quote reminds me of a Chinese proverb. It is a foolish farmer who quits the day before the harvest.
Yeah. I think that's one of my motivating things is I hate that wasted potential. When I see potential in a person or a group or an organization or even myself, sometimes every time you make a choice, you are in essence picking one path of potential energy and ignoring another. So there's no way to get around it. You have to make choices.
But in the end, you'll find your way home.
Yeah.
It's a labyrinth.
Yeah.
And sometimes the labyrinth, when you go into a labyrinth, it'll bring you close to the center to begin with, and then it will bring you right back out to and you think, well, I was getting close to the center, and now I'm out on the periphery, lost.
Yeah.
But it's still the same path.
Yeah.
It's like the classic thing, I've got vinyl, and you put the needle on the vinyl. And so I remember in school, I had this math question of, like, if the grooves of this wide, and if the ridges between are this wide, and the it's 7 inches or whatever it is across, how many grooves are there in this album? The answer is 1. There's only 1 groove.
Yeah, I love that one.
It goes round and round and spirals. It's a spiral.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because people think, oh no, they're not concentric circles. There's one spiral of life that goes through different cycles.
I've always loved that analogy. Or that example.
Yeah.
It's because I've always kind of loved those little trick questions too.
Yeah.
They really make you think. And
Well,
my mom used to tell me this story about when she was in high school. There was a class, and the kids were being whatever, they weren't paying attention a lot or something. And so for the final, the professor, there was one instruction on the board. It was like, before starting your exam, read every single question. And like people just started doing it. My mom actually read every single question, and the last question was, if you've now read every question, quietly turn your book in and leave. And you get 100%. And she was the only person that actually did it. So
see, that's it.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because as you were speaking, it prompted me another thing. The question, people say there are 2 kinds of people who see that the glass is half empty, and those that see that the glass is half full. I was thinking, if we put this back into the Matrix movie that you and I love, if you have Morpheus and Neo in conversation, if Morpheus says to Neo, is the glass half empty, glass full, and he makes a choice, and then Morpheus says, actually, there is no glass.
Right. Yeah, there is no spoon.
There is no spoon. There is no glass.
That's right.
So you can see half empty, winning, losing. And actually why don't we bring in something, and once again, we're using texts and wording that was written maybe 80 years ago. This one was written probably 100 years ago. This is Rudyard Kipling's If. I know people are familiar with it, but listen to it in the light of the soul viewing crisis and failure as the pedagogical approach to revealing itself. So here's what Rudyard Kipling wrote. He's called the poem If. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired of waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these 2 impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So that was obviously a father to a son. So if you take away the gender out of that, and it's basically saying, when you run into these polarities, triumph and disaster, and in fact, this line from Rudyard Kipling's poem, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat these 2 impostors just the same, I believe is written above the player's entrance to the Wimbledon Tennis Club.
Yeah, you mentioned that and I think I've seen that shot before where they pass through that door, and but there's like tennis is the epitome of that. There's 2 people, they walk out there, and just by the, the nature of it, one person's going to walk out the winner, one person's going to walk out the loser, and like, but how do you keep doing that? Like, tennis is such, because that's constantly, each game is like that. Each serve, there's a winner and a loser, so it's this constant dealing with that. And that's a kind of semantical kind of juggling act you have to do. And that's why I find tennis fascinating.
Well, and the fact that it's called game, set, and match, and they count it love.
Yeah.
So when you don't get it's called love.
Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful?
That is.
So anyway, so following up from the Rudyard Kipling poem, we've got another sentence here from Failure in the compilation Ponder on This, taken from Discipleship in the New Age. Recognize failure if it is there, but then with a face lifted to the light and a smile upon your lips, turn your back upon such failure and go with steadfastness forward. The only regret that is justifiable is based on failure to learn the lessons of failure. Coming back to your original statement of the band.
Yeah. Man, that's so true. And I think also, when you think of a lifetime and, because we experience it in each moment and it seems forever, but wow, what a blink, and, we just even if you just take away the one beautiful thing that you've learned, then it was worth it.
Yeah, because it's another pearl on your necklace. Mm-hmm. And I know it's said that sometimes you incarnate because there's one more pearl you need to string on your necklace. And so your life may seem inconsequential. They only achieved this, but that's all they came down for.
And I love that metaphor too of the pearl because of how the pearl is made. Obviously, it's it's made for the irritation, the fire by friction. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it's underwater in the feeling level. That's when a piece of grit gets in the oyster.
Yeah, I mean, I could just imagine. You're in that whatever the other place is other than here. And they're saying like, oh, look at that. You got to go back in there. You got that one missing pearl,
But Joey, guess what one of the names of the planet is? Mm-hmm. The Blue Pearl.
The Blue Pearl, yeah. And yeah, it's such a beautiful name. And then when you start to think about it, oh yeah, because it's
the place where wisdom and joy are the result of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Not because somebody is sadistic and inflicting stuff, but that's the nature of the grind, of the grit inside the shoe, inside the oyster shell.
Yeah, it's a tough school here. This is a high level learning environment.
So we've covered crisis, we've covered failure. There is a third point that I'd like to bring in because it's the sort of the trilogy or the trifecta. It's this whole thing of perfectionment, which Agni Yoga talks about, which is really the striving towards the ideal. Because sometimes the striving towards the ideal doesn't accept failure. Because it doesn't understand failure as this is what I've reached, and means failure is a time to set up the lessons to expand, to go further. So here's a quote from the Agni Yoga teachings because they talk about perfectionment. It says, assist all who strive for perfectionment. Discern where there is striving and where possibility of defection. Discern where there is love for assent and where the restlessness of doubt. He is a false teacher who elevates doubt into dogma. Distrust is not the aim of the discipline of the spirit kindled by truth. So what he's saying with the striving towards perfectionment is that is the call of life. We're responding to the call of life because if we're returning to the one is the image and the ideal of perfection. The returning to the one is the realization, the making real of that ideal of perfection. And therefore, you bring it on home, and the one then has regrouped itself, having experienced itself, having failed, and returned home. When you put it into a cosmic frame like that, everything sort of changes. And one of the other verbs that's used a lot we talked about daring. Daring is used in Agni Yoga. They use the word fiery daring or fiery striving. And striving for me is our response to the call of life. And what it sets up is something, a phrase that came to me. It brings us into the magnetic momentum of life. So our striving, we suddenly, it's like we catch the wave.
Mm-hmm.
We catch the life wave. Otherwise, we're just there either standing on the beach looking at the water, or the waves aren't up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating when you think about, we almost have to forget that we are part of that perfect one, or else we wouldn't try anything.
Well, and
I think about that a lot. I also sometimes I'm not torn, but I think about the kind of Buddhist perspective of like sometimes the Buddhist perspective seems to not have that fiery striving. So
yeah, and yet,
mm-hmm.
how do you break free from the chains of attachment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The striving can be surrender, but how difficult is it to surrender when you're attached to something?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it requires an act of will, Joey, and that's striving.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that is that's the answer
It
right
has
there.
nothing to do with what the action looks like
Mm-hmm.
on the outside.
Right. Yeah. So if you're sitting there meditating, that is still an act of fiery striving. Because
Absolutely.
you're letting go of all those things that you have an energetic cord attachment to in this
It's like the
inner
hot air
creation.
balloon. You're throwing out the sand, but
Yeah.
you're ascending.
Yeah.
And it always says that, here's a quote, a feeling of dissatisfaction and of striving towards perfectionment distinguishes the bearers of synthesis. So anytime we say yes to life and are part of the evolutionary movement of this planet, because remember, it's lives within lives within lives, we're going to feel the gap between the ideal and the presently realized.
Mm-hmm.
I call that the God gap. So life is really bridging the God gap or revealing the truth of that which lives inside us. And it may take many, many lifetimes. And the problem is not to get hung up and down on ourselves and think we failed because we haven't reached perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectionment is an inner state of being that is who we are. We're returning home to it. So we can't lose it or fail to get there. We can just either get there more rapidly, or we can delay the journey and we can take a detour or go around the block again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's how I
when
see
you were
it.
saying that, it was almost like really the state of perfection is when you are unmoved, you're unbuoyed by the things that are going around. Like you're able to have failure, but you're not a failure. You're able to have success, but you don't think of yourself as Ingrid, as some kind of, you're neither the hero nor the villain. You're just the person learning the lesson.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple more on perfection, and I just
Mm-hmm.
want to quote from Agni Yoga, and that's pretty deep. So I don't want to just put them out there and not dive into them. Here it says, to know one's destination means to know that the spirit of man is an expression of higher forces. Only he who knows these strivings can understand how it is needful to hearken sensitively to the voice of the higher forces. What a wonderful concept that man has been created in the image of God. Precisely this reveals infinity, multiplying all forces and aspiration. How is it possible for man to deny infinity and immortality when before him is the great comparison of the image of the macrocosm with the microcosm? Surely such an exhortation is a powerful call to perfectionment of the spirit. Reminding about the prototype of God must lead man into new paths, for it is impossible to scorn with impunity the higher destiny by an expression of denial. And then it says, and the ogres who affirm a self-willed sojourn of man on the earth will perish. Thus let us manifest sensitiveness of striving for understanding of our destination. It points back up to, and now we're going to go we're going to go out into the cosmos again. And this is more of a cosmo concept I'd like to bring in, but it's also something I've been sensing into recently. We bumped into this phrase before, the principle of hierarchy. And immediately there's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction because hierarchy seems to mean, for a lot of people, a group of older men, usually white, who are telling other people what to do. But in fact, the whole of evolution and creation is supposedly based on the hierarchic principle. This is not a people, this is a principle. And I know a friend of mine changed it to holarchic rather than hierarchic. It simply means lives within lives, within lives, within lives. And this way, if we truly live and move and have our being inside a greater being, then our success is inevitable because we are being held, and our goal of achievement has already been achieved by that which is holding us. So it's impossible to fail. We can just delay the journey. And that's how evolution works. It's turtles all the way down, or angels all the way up, or whatever you want to call it. But it means if we are striving to something and we're being held inside a life that has already achieved what we've achieved, therefore it is possible. It is inevitable. However, depending our ability to exert will and to learn by our failures, we determine the seasons of growth and the length of the seasons of growth. And that's where I think you go back to what you referred to earlier, Joey. It's about our relationship with time and failure. I know there are a lot of people, and myself included, who look at your lives and say, God, it's a failure. What does that mean? I've achieved a lot. Joey, you've achieved a lot. But I can do, it's like glass half empty, half full. I can think of all the things I haven't achieved when I look at what I sense the potential is. But that's an unfair way of doing it. That's the pain of comparison again.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that my good friend Roger, who I learned so many life lessons from, but I remember there was a tour I was doing, and you know, like I was the guitar tech, backline tech on this tour, and I was like I was in my late 20s, and it was my first tour with these guys, and all the crew was so much younger than me. They were like in their early 20s, and they'd already achieved so much, and Roger just reminded me, is like, you guys are all on different paths. If they didn't have to go through what you had to get through to get here, they had different stories, and they had different. And if you look at it like that, it's just going to ruin it for you. And that was the first time that someone had really, imparted that wisdom to me. And that is that comparison is the thief of joy.
And I'm going to put in one more. So bear with me, please, Joey, and those you're listening to.
Bring
one more, the final. I promise you, the final Agni Yoga quote, because it actually builds on what you've just said. Spirit and matter are united in space. While being unified, they begin their existence in their sphere of germination. In this unity, forms of life are created, and they pass through their circles of perfectionment. Being unified with matter, the spirit can be liberated only by the path of perfectionment. For from the moment of realization of the act of liberation, the breaking away is accomplished. In the cosmic laboratory, these two principles, unification and liberation, are the fundamentals of creativeness. Only the impetuousness of the spirit leads to deliverance, which reflects upon consciousness and heart. Striving of the spirit creates a most subtle vibration. Thus, the liberated spirit knows the cosmic fiery vibration. The manifestation of spirit and matter must be sought in each affirmation of life. On the path to the fiery world, let us strive for the deliverance from matter. So the whole thing of perfectionment is the path we follow for the revelation of the ideal, to realize the ideal. It's not something bad we leave behind. Nothing is left behind. Everything is liberated, and when it's liberated, it comes home. It comes home to a oneness, to a unity. So when Agni Yoga says that unity or unification and liberation are the fundamentals of creativeness, it takes on a whole another dimension. I need to ponder on this for a lot longer. I don't think we can do that in a podcast now, but
it's funny. That's actually my main takeaway from this episode, and it doesn't happen all the time. But just in prepping and reading, going back and rereading these sections, I was like, wait a minute, like this is going to be something I'm focused on probably the rest of the summer. Like this is that just that first section of crisis is something that I know for myself I'm going to keep coming back to, and I think that is the thing is like it's just time.
Well, the other thing is I can't get the truth of crisis if I'm in victim mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
There is no way.
Yeah. You got to.
And everything's happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, woe is me. Self-pity. Self-pity, doubt, and fear is the unholy trinity that severs the link with life.
Yeah. There it is. Just learn that and you're all good. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Good night.
Yes. Just be kind and loving to yourself and other people for every incarnation from now on, and everything will be fine.
All right.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Well, hopefully this podcast wasn't a failure, Joey.
Yes.
Or hopefully it was.
And hopefully this wasn't a loss of time. This was time we enjoyed spending together.
Exactly. Well, thank you for the time spent together.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And thank you. And we'll see you next week.
Okay. Bye.